A bipartisan report released today by the Senate Intelligence Committee confirms the findings of the U.S. intelligence community, which stated in January 2017 that Russia definitely meddled in the 2016 presidential election and that Russia definitely wanted to hurt the candidacy of Hillary Clinton and help the candidacy of Donald Trump. Specifically, the unclassified report released by Republican Richard Burr and Democrat Mark Warner of the Intelligence Committee says that the committee's assessment, quote, showed that Moscow sought to denigrate Secretary Clinton and Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for Trump. The report today also says that the committee heard consistently that analysts were under no politically motivated pressure to reach any conclusions. And the committee has seen additional examples of Russia's attempts to sow discord, undermine democratic institutions, and interfere in U.S. elections and those of our allies. The Kremlin said today that it is possible that Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump will meet one-on-one with no staff present except translators at the beginning of their summit meeting in Helsinki on July 16th. And so once again, Americans are learning about the plans of the President of the United States from the Russian government instead of from the White House. Joining our discussion now, Malcolm Nance, an MSNBC counterterrorism and intelligence analyst and author of the new book, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, How Putin and His Spies Are Undermining America and Dismantling the West. Also with us, Evelyn Farkas, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. She is an MSNBC national security analyst. And Malcolm, I want to start with you on the issue of the possibility of the president sitting down one-on-one plus translators with Vladimir Putin.
It's absolutely fascinating. You know, earlier today on Twitter, Asha Rangappa, the former FBI officer, made a joke that he was going in to meet his handler, was going to discuss any concerns that he have, any counterintelligence contacts that he has, his surveillance detection routines, anything that a handled asset would want to report into his boss. And at this point, I'm really starting to wonder, because why would he go off the record in a private meeting with Vladimir Putin at a time he has been under the gun for more than 2 years in the belief that he has conspired with Russia to rig a U.S. election and may possibly have involved himself in other nefarious activities, and he just decides he's going to go prove it?
Evelyn Farkas, it is an astonishing thing to watch. I mean, with any other politician who is suspected of anything in this direction, that politician would go out of his or her way to be much stiffer and more formal and more distant in relations with Russia or whatever country was in question.
Right, Lawrence. I mean, any other president or politician for that matter, and granted, okay, he wasn't a politician until recently, but nevertheless would do everything possible to remove any shadow of any doubt that there was something nefarious going on. I have to say I'm also further concerned because what I'm hearing not only from the administration is actually confirmation that there is going to be a one-on-one meeting, but that there's a lot of consternation, a lot of worry inside our government. I mean, that to me is shocking. And people just feel like they can't resign because of their concern, but they're watching some kind of train wreck, some kind of really bad movie unfold, except that it's reality. So I don't understand why this is happening. Last time Donald Trump met with Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of a bigger summit, he actually had a meeting with only one interpreter, the Russian interpreter. So if that happens again, that's even worse. But, you know, okay, having interpreters is good if at least we have the U.S. interpreter, because there will be something of a record in that case. But the optics are bad. It doesn't make sense from a policy perspective. It's just more than unfortunate.
And this news comes to us on the same day that the Senate Intelligence Committee report, and this is the full committee, this is all 8 Republicans and all 7 Democrats. The committee says this: the committee concurs with intelligence and open source assessments that this influence campaign was approved by President Putin. And so the committee is saying Vladimir Putin did this, and now Donald Trump is saying that he's going to have a one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin. Within the context of all of that, let's listen to what former CIA Director John McLaughlin said about this today.
The president is an intelligence recruiter's dream. He's totally transparent with his tweets and his public comments. His frustrations, his desires, his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities are all hanging out there. And Putin, of course, is a trained KGB intelligence operator.
Malcolm Nance, you know that any screenwriter or fiction writer would try to make this more subtle. They wouldn't actually have the Russian president be a former KGB intelligence operator talking to the most ignorant president of the United States in history.
Yeah, you would think that, right? But this is like a really bad version of the old movie, Kevin Costner movie, No Way Out, where in that private meeting, is Donald Trump going to just suddenly blurt out that he speaks Russian? Doubtful. But for the most part, I really think that John McLaughlin today put it perfectly. And I have a whole chapter on why Donald Trump is a Russian's dream. It's not just that they may have motivated him to see the world their way. They framed the world for him. And every time that he had contact with them, they created that perception bubble, that entire worldview that he now espouses. Breakup and dissolution of NATO in a slow roll, I think he really believes that. Getting rid of all world trade, and breaking up the Atlantic Alliance in Europe, he has bought into that. Crimea belonging to Russia, he has bought into that. He is, I said this today in the same interview with John McLaughlin. When he goes to this NATO conference, who will he represent? Will he represent the United States, or will he represent Moscow?
Or Donald Trump.
Maria Bartiromo did a recent interview with the president where she got a lot of criticism for not doing any follow-ups. She did ask some good questions. So here's an example of her good question and just an extraordinary non-answer by the president of the United States. Let's listen to this.
Are you going to mention the meddling when you meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin July 16th?
I'd like to see some answers as to why we didn't take the server, why the FBI didn't take the server from the DNC.
And Evelyn Farkas, that was his complete answer to, are you going to mention the Russian meddling in our election when you speak to Vladimir Putin? He said, I'd like to see some answers as to why we didn't take the server, why the FBI didn't take the server from the DNC.
I mean, Lawrence, this isn't the first time I think I've said to you I want to tear my hair out, because he's doing his typical deflection. I'm going to talk about Hillary Clinton now. Nobody cares about Hillary Clinton anymore, and servers and emails and whatever. But that's the first thing he grasps for. I have to say just a thing about that report that came out today. I think it's very useful that the Senate Intelligence Committee came out clearly on the record saying we believe our own intelligence. We looked through it ourselves in a bipartisan fashion. What's disturbing to me about it is that it came out today on a Friday. Well, it feels like a Friday, but right before a holiday. And it should have come out before those senators made the decision to go over to Moscow, which you mentioned earlier in the program. I think it's unfortunate because it seems to me that they could agree on the message, but there's something wrong with the politics of releasing this report.
I don't think the president could have made it any more clear to Maria Bartiromo that he has absolutely no intention of mentioning election meddling to Vladimir Putin. Evelyn Farkas, Malcolm Nance, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.